Right, I've titled my talk today, "The King is Dead, Long Live the King." You know that reference. So King 3 is gone, King 4 is here. Long live the King. Bit about my background. I've had a fairly tortuous career, I guess. I've done all sorts of things. I started off my career with Deloitte. They weren't called Deloitte in those days. That's how old I am. They were very different then. I moved to Barlow's for a number of years, left them, and started in the entrepreneurial space. I've been there for the last close on 30 years. So professionally, I left the profession, went to IT, and then I've been for a while in aviation. I've sat on a number of boards of companies in the aviation space. I've sat on some mining spaces, and I'm now in the space where I've looked at who I am, and I'm moving into executive coaching. So kind of speaking to people, helping people do what they do best to help them perform is what I'm aiming at right now. I came to King because I know a little bit about the Companies Act. I've used it in my professional career, and King's always been there. But this particular one, I've decided to take a closer interest. So what I'm going to take you through today is a fairly high-level overview of what King is and how it works. Here's my agenda for the day. A bit of the history, a bit of the reason for why do we need a new report? So in other words, why the old King died. What's the new King about? Then we're going to talk about fundamental concepts. And the reason I've taken you through this particular way is if you understand these concepts, reading King becomes a lot more sensible. I've struggled through this thing. I've summarized it. It's pretty clear, but if you go straight into the principles, you'll get lost because these concepts are not understood. So that's why I'm spending time there. We won't really get to see the principles. I'll give you one as an example, but we don't have time for all of that. Then we're going to go into the philosophy that underpins this whole strategy of the King Commission. I'll give you a few highlights and maybe we'll have time for an example. So that's what the agenda is today. It's going to be high level. It may be a bit quick. I'm not going to have much time to drill down too much, but I will try and leave some time for questions. And I'll do my best to answer the questions. I'm not an expert on King. I don't think anyone other than the committee who created it are considered experts. It's just been released, but it's a fascinating document. Okay, you may or may not know that it started off with Mervyn King in 1993. He was approached to please draw up, get a commission together and draw up a body of knowledge that describes corporate governance. And since that time, there have been 4 iterations of King. So it's been around for as long as our democracy's been around, and it's been one of the doyens in the industry. Come in, guys. I need to point out that the King Commission, the King Report, has all been sponsored by the Institute of Directors Southern Africa. It's their intellectual property. They're the owners of the product. They're the owners of the concept. But they don't mind me. I'm a member of the IODCA. They don't mind us talking about it. Obviously, they want to spread it far and wide and hopefully make this thing a universally accepted bit of logic. The interesting thing about King is it's not legislated. It's not prescriptive yet. Now, I add that word in yet because I've seen what's coming. I've read the document, and I think it's going to become part of our legislation, not by being promulgated as an act, but by being part of common law. I see a day coming, not too many years hence, where judges, when they're sitting and deciding whether a person, a fiduciary obligation was or was not fulfilled, whether a director did or didn't show due care and skill, they're going to say, well, how do we measure that? Because the Companies Act is not very clear. And you can go into company law, common law, and say, from precedent, saying, well, in this case, they did this. This is a far easier piece of writing to measure. It's very, very measurable. I think we're going to see judges bringing this in and say, well, if you applied King correctly and explained, we think that you did show due care and skill. And that's going to bring it into our legal system. So it's not necessarily going to be an act, but it's going to become part of our legislative system, is my view. The question that begs to be asked is, well, we've had 3 of these iterations. Why do we need a 4th one? What made the need for this thing happen? I think the most overwhelming thing is a 2-word answer. The world has changed. Since 2009, we've gone through cataclysmic change. Let me tell you some of the stuff. And it's been coming for a while, and it's getting worse. We've seen financial instability around the world. The world has become very financially wobbly. From the capital crisis in the USA to the sovereignty crisis to Brexit. These are big issues circling our globe, causing instability. There's massive, as you well know, climate change that's causing other kinds of instability and fears. I mean, I saw the news report from last week. I was here 2 weeks ago, and my mate said, oh, we've got a drought. A week later, I see floods like I haven't seen in Johannesburg in living memory, my living memory. And so you've got to realize that something's happening in the climate. It's not as it used to be. There's a depletion, and we know this, of natural assets like we've never seen before. And they're running out, and that's where the crises are coming from, a lot of them. That we're running out of these natural assets, and we've got to come with alternatives. Here's the one I'm looking around the room, that's probably going to get most of you where it got me. I don't see any people that are what we would call millennials here. We'll talk about them in a minute. But there's been a massive shift in the social media platform. And that shift alone is causing this incredibly interesting, and that's my euphemism for when I don't know what else to call it. Social media has made this thing called radical transparency. And whether you like it or not, that's uncomfortable. Things are now transparent that never used to be, and we have to deal with it. We can't close it, we can't shut the windows anymore. The social media wave has done that, and there's no closing it, no turning back. So it's in the context of these major upheavals and changes that King 4 was born. Oh, I didn't mention, this is what you guys understand, the whole concept of big data. When King 3 was written, I don't think big data had been born. It might have been there, but it hadn't been coined. That phrase hadn't been coined, and certainly the ability of analytics to understand this stuff rapidly and take massive amount of data and to interpret it hadn't yet occurred. So that's causing major change, as you guys well know. And lastly, this whole idea of disruptive technology, that's here to stay. The technologies that are coming into our lives are disrupting the status quo. We talk about artificial intelligence, 3D printing. I've had you just talk about your folks, and you've got parents that are still alive, and you tell them that you can print things in 3 dimensions. You can print biomass in 3D. You can print tissue cells. They just can't comprehend this. That's the disruption that's coming at us. So King 4 has been written with that as a backdrop, to say how do we then as organizations, and I use that word intentionally. We used to say in King 3, companies. We no longer say that. We talk about organizations. It's a broader definition, and I'll talk about that in a minute, to try and make it more applicable. So that's one of the major reasons that King 4 found a need. There was a real need to address some of the issues that these major changes in the world have caused. I looked at the word industrial revolution. And the first industrial revolution was when they discovered steam and made it work. And they had steam engines. Then the second one was when they discovered electricity and made it work and create production in a bigger scale. The third industrial revolution was when they started using data, electronics and information, And now they're saying that the fourth industrial revolution is here. And that's the advent of this digital revolution. And there's this merging of digital, of society, and even biological spheres are coming together, and it's causing a revolution. One thing we know about revolutions of this nature, there's got to be an enabler, and there's plenty of those around right now that enable the change. There needs to be, it usually comes about fairly swiftly. So any revolution that's happened in this type of revolution comes about swiftly. The third thing is it brings about massive either improvement or change or disruption or all three. That's what these revolutions do. They bring about massive change or disruption or improvement. And fourthly, things are never the same again. It's much like that proverbial wave. If you've ever surfed or watched a surfer, they sit out there for ages and they can see the wave coming. But unless you start to paddle before that wave gets you, it's going to miss you. You're going to miss it. You're not going to catch it. And it's going to come past and you're going to be left saying, and what just happened? I went up, the rising tide lifted me, and I went straight back down, and the other guys caught it and I didn't. So that's what these waves of revolution do. They take those that are ready, they swamp some people that are not, and they leave the rest wondering what just happened. I'm going to show you a video clip. I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but it's about the fourth industrial revolution. And there's a couple of points that I'll lift out of the video clip once it's done. I apologize if the sound's a little low. I've turned it up as high as I can, but good news is there is, for those of you that sat at the back, the naughty kids at the back, now you pay the price. You should have come here in the front into the spit zone. I call this the spit zone, where you get wet. You guys at the back, you're going to have to just read, because it's all subtext. So if you've got good eyesight, but if you've got bad hearing and bad eyesight, you're over 40. So come, no, I'm just kidding. Come to the front and hear.
We are wondering what is happening to the world. Everything is changing.
The very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change.
Our bodies will be so high-tech, we won't be able to really distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial.
Inside our own heads is the most complex arrangement of matter in the known universe.
You might ask yourself, can we get to be superhumans?
The original Industrial Revolution was driven by the discovery that you could use steam engines to do all kinds of interesting things.
But that was followed by additional revolutions for electricity and computers and communications technology. We're now in the early stages of the fourth industrial revolution, which is bringing together digital, physical, and biological systems.
One of the features of this fourth industrial revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
With the ability to visualize brain activity, for example, through a simple consumer-based EEG device, it gives us access to ourselves in ways that we've never before thought possible. It unlocks the black box that is the brain and enables us to really, truly be able to realize an identity that is aspirational.
There's now a scientific foundation for the effects of mindfulness on the brain, on the genome, on biological aging. And when the human mind does know itself, then you get the potential for a new renaissance that restructures itself in terms of our relationship to life, our relationship to the planet, our relationship to work.
We need a different economic model. And by that I don't mean capitalism versus communism. What I'm talking about is a shift in the system along the lines of the two big changes that happened in the 20th century, Keynesianism, with a much greater focus on health and education and the role of government working with business, and then a reaction against that in late century to neoliberalism, where the focus was on free markets, freedom of the individual, and getting governments out of the way. We need a shift to a new system that will allow us to meet the basic needs of every human on the planet, that will live within planetary means, that will be fairer, and that will be focused as its key goal, not on growth per se, but on maximizing human well-being. And history tells us that a values shift is triggered by creation of a new story about how we want to live.
I see the circular economy as something which fits very closely with mankind's goal to be innovative and creative and to always progress. We can use asset tracking, we can use IT, we can use 3D printing to enable this different economic model to recover materials, feed them back into the economy, and really to decouple growth from the resource constraints we have.
The reason we live in cities is not different today than it was 10,000 years ago. Even if we have got networks connecting us, we still want to have places where we meet in person. Well, this means the place where we work and the place where we live are much closer to each other, a city where we don't need to have big supply chains in order to produce things, where many things can be sourced locally thanks to 3D printing and robotics. So if we're able to do something to transform cities, to make them more efficient, then the impact can be huge.
Think about the prospect of getting rid of plastics. We must not only be inspired or informed by nature, but actually use natural organisms with which to design products and building parts. Only instead of varying material properties, we're varying biological functionality.
Design is critical today because it's the first signal of human intention. So the question of adding quality to quantity, it isn't a matter of simply circulating things that are potentially toxic. It's circulating things that are safe and healthy for all generations. So the goal is no longer, I want to be less bad, less monotonous, less unsafe, less unjust. It's really about a diverse, safe, healthy, and just world with clean air, clean water, clean soil, clean energy.
Together we are fighting to preserve our fragile climate from irreversible damage and devastation of unthinkable proportions.
If we think about the original Industrial Revolution, it was an energy revolution. I like to think of it as a kind of bookending of a period in human history during which we used fossil fuels, and it worked very well for us for a long time. But now we have to bring that to an end. We have energy technologies that can power our civilization: solar, wind, biomass. So then the question is, well, how do we get grid integration? Maybe the wind is blowing in Denmark, the sun is shining in Germany, and now you can move that electricity through an integrated grid. You can supply energy to everyone who needs it, and you can supply energy at all times.
Walking around, you do see different stuff as far as like the body marriage line. They use a lot of things that help them lift up and move things to the car. You just sit there and, program something, and it has its own set mind to go ahead and do everything. And then as humans, we just come in and take the extra step to help the technology.
It's not the cure-all for everything. There's definitely a lot of things where people perform the operation better, but certainly for the right applications, robotics are a huge improvement for the process.
The prediction of 5 million jobs lost by 2020 to technology is serious, but it's not the main question. Construction, manufacturing, services, public health and education, these industries will still exist. The main question is, what will be the future of work? How will we define work? How will we share the wealth?
From the viewpoint of the labor or jobs, now we really need new education or new training.
We're working with a World in Motion in FIRST Robotics, trying to encourage students from 3rd grade all the way up through the end of high school. We had students make sailboats, and then we had them race them, and so they could see how quickly they could move. And they immediately went back and started to say, oh, I saw what happened, I'm going to go change this or that. And that was 3rd graders.
I've just given a prize to a kid of 18 years old that has discovered something really very, very unique. Came up with how to get better productivity and better yields for seeds of corn. And so he basically came with the idea that if you would perforate these seeds, you would get more food. And you think about it and say, but he didn't go to university. So how does he get all that knowledge? And he told me, I've been watching YouTube since the age of 12, and I'm so interested that I've seen everything about it. I've read everything about it. The world is really open to learning. The thing is, how do you give the incentive to your kids to do that?
It's this ability of digital technology to change outcomes, to truly empower people all over the world that can create a more equitable growth, because I think the world needs that.
Fourth Industrial Revolution has the potential to make inequalities visible and to make them less acceptable in the future, and hopefully to gather and garner political support to take the necessary decision to reduce the gap.
Right, so there's a couple of things, and I think that's an ideal backdrop for King 4, and explains a lot of things. I just want to remind you of a couple of things they said there. Early on in the video, it says there's a shift to a new system that will allow us to meet the needs of every human, that will allow us to live within the planetary means and be fairer and focus on humans as well. That's happening. The issue is, are companies aware of it? Is the way they govern themselves taking that into cognizance? And I think that's the positioning of a King 4 report. I love the one comment that design is the first signal of human intention. I have for a long time believed that nothing exists without it first being a thought. Everything exists by first being a thought. And that's exactly the same thing. So if we're going to change anything in this world, the way our companies are governed, the way our